Filipinos naturally love sports. The whole country stops whenever boxing superstar Manny Pacquiao takes the ring. Pinoys are beginning to appreciate football because of the success of the Azgals and are waiting for the Gilas Pilipinas to take center stage at the Basketball World Cup. That's why rumor has it that there are more basketball courts than health centers in barangays across the country. But here's the irony. In the last 4 Olympics, the Philippines failed to bring home even a single medal. In fact, the Philippines has never won a gold medal. The 2013 Southeast Asian Games or SEA Games also marked the country's lowest medal haul in the history of the Biennial Games. The Philippines ranked only 7th among 11 countries with 101 medals. In 2012, former Senator Francis Pangilinan ordered a review of the effectiveness and efficiency of the Philippine Sports Commission or PSC and of the Philippine Olympic Committee or POC. The PSC is the government's funding arm for developing amateur sports, while the POC is a private, non-government organization recognized by the International Olympic Committee responsible for athletes competing in the Olympics and other international tournaments. As dirty as politics are in sports, issues of corruption and power struggles hound these associations. Recently, the Philippine Amateur Track and Field Association or PATAFA threatened to haul the PSC to court, particularly Commissioner Jolly Gomez, for what it claimed was direct interference and abuse of authority against members of the association's coaching staff. These and more issues delay the already overdue improvement of Philippine sports.
Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. We are passionate about sports, and for sure, we do not lack talent. But why is it that the Philippines is failing to shine? Some say we've reached a critical point in Philippine sports when issues of political bickering, lack of budget, corruption, among others, drag down the ability of sports to progress and our athletes suffer. So our question for tonight is the government effectively addressing the problems of Philippine sports? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. All right, joining us tonight in our discussion is the Commissioner of the Philippine Sports Commission, Jose Luis Jolly Gomez. Jolly, good evening. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening, Rod, and good evening to everyone.
Yes, give us, in summary, your answer to the debate question. Is the Philippines effectively providing for Philippine sports?
Well, I think that when you look at the mandate of Philippine sports, our mandate is really to try to develop sports for all, sports all over the country. With the limited funds that we have, we're able to accomplish whatever we can and promote sports in areas that are willing to adopt sports programs. But you know, we have 100 million Filipinos, and in order to be able to address 100 million Filipinos will definitely cost a lot more than the money that we have at the moment.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioner Jolly. On the opposing side, the familiar face in Philippine sports, Mr. Chino Trinidad, a sports journalist and a veteran observer of Philippine sports. Sir Chino, Chairman. Commissioner.
Ang ganda naman, veteran. Para ako tumanda bigla eh. Pero una-una, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Yung question is, are we addressing it? Alam mo, historical perspective,
yes.
Philippine sports has always been the least of the concerns and the least of the priorities of this country. So, yun na yung sagot ko. It's a no.
All right. So let's start off the debate. Well, I don't want to call it a debate. It's more of a discussion, so that we inform the viewers. But of course, I'm sure that there will be opposing views between the two of you. So let's start off with the PSC. Has the PSC lived up to its mandate, in your opinion, Commissioner Jolly? Has the PSC lived up to its mandate to developing and improving Philippine sports?
Well, I think when you look at where the PSC is right now, when you look at the PSC law, the law that created the PSC, we actually replaced the project Gintong Alay, which was done during the time of former President Marcos. And the PSC law was actually meant to replace Gintong Alay, which was for elite sports, but at the same time, the law became very general in terms of in creating a grassroots sports program, regional development programs, coordinating with the DepEd and the Department of the DILG, because at that time they already broke away from the DEX, Department of Education, Culture and Sports, and created the PSC. So when you look at what we have to work with, and the limited funds that we have, it becomes quite an uphill battle on where you can prioritize your funds. Every time, like we were talking earlier, and just like everyone that I speak to regarding sports, they always ask one thing: are we champions? How many medals do we win?
Right.
Will we ever be world champions? In my opinion, and the opinion of many of us today at the PSC, it's not really about being champions all the time. There's a bigger goal that we are trying to address, which is really the total well-being of the Filipino. Sports is such a fantastic, Chino, you and I, we're all sports people, and you know what sports has done for us personally. And this is what we want to cascade down to the Filipinos.
But Commissioner Jolly, winning, as they say, winning takes care of everything. For a lot of athletes, that's normally what happened. And I guess, just taking off from what people are telling me and my own personal opinion, usually when people win, like for example Manny Pacquiao and we had Onyok a couple of Olympics ago, it provides inspiration for people to get into sports. So if you're not winning, how are you gonna then entice all of those people, 100 million people, to get involved in sports?
I think when you talk, you have to define what winning is. Sometimes we're always looking at, everyone talks about winning the Olympics or being the champion of the Olympics. But a lot of times, when you look at the great majority of people, not just in the Philippines but all over the world, that have their fondest memories of sports, it's not about winning a world championship. It's about winning in a competition where they try to do their best. So you have a lot of people that I've come across, a lot of people when I travel around the country, who tell me they were once the Palaro champions, or they won they were UAAP champions, and for them that is a memory that they keep with them. And that's what lets the dad continue, playing with his kids or getting his kids into sports.
It's those memories,
It's really those memories of being able to compete at your best, test yourself as an athlete, and come out as a winner. So that's my definition of winning.
Okay, Commissioner Chino, I'll call you Commissioner.
Naging commissioner
Obviously, you're a
ka na rin,
commissioner also. But Chino, your thoughts on...
Delikado yung commissioner. Taken on from a context of sports. Good ako dyan. I was former PBL commissioner. Pero sa context ng ibang klaseng commissioner, ayaw namin ni attorney ng ganun. Nakakatakot. But
now, the PSC, you think it has lived up to its mandate, given its limited budgets and resources?
Una-una, yung limited resources, it has always been there. It has been a problem. Una-una, budget for sports will never be enough. Hindi ho sasapat ang budget para sa sports kung inyong pag-uusapan yan. Kahit na ilang milyon ang ilagay natin dyan, kahit na ilang porsyento ng PAGCOR ang ilagay natin dyan, it will never be enough kasi ang dami natin gustong servisan. Pinakamalaking problema ng PSC, and I think si Commissioner will agree to this, ang PSC, the law that created it at yung laman niya is neither here nor there. Ang dami niyang gustong gawin, hindi siya makafocus. Like in Section 2, kahapon ko lang nalaman to, under the law that created it, it is mandated by law to take care of yung physical education, yung PE, yung well-being ng mga Pilipino. And yet, under them, kailangan din nilang i-run yung national program. So, which is which? Saan sila pupunta?
Kasi those are two different programs.
Iba yun. Magkaiba yun. Yun yung sinasabi ni attorney kanina. Yung PSC is being tasked with so many things. Ang responsibility niya napakalaki. Anong uunahin nila? Di ba? Hindi mo sila masisisi. That's a problem. Kung yung sports is the least of the priorities of this country, ever since, hindi lang tong panahon ni Presidente Noynoy, kahit dati pa, the problem is really the prioritization.
But I think ang observation ng maraming tao is that nag-deteriorate. Parang every Olympics is where it's been 4 Olympics now we don't have a medal, and even in Southeast Asian Games or Asian Games, our performance is dipping. So it's either we're stagnant and everyone else is improving, or we're going down. What is the case?
Both. Okay. yes to all. Yung deterioration is there, no? Kitang-kita mo naman yun sa performance natin. Kawawa rin yung mga athletes natin. Imagine in 2005, we were #1 in Southeast Asia. in the last Southeast Asian Games, we were number 7. So dun pa lang, do the numbers. Kahit na ano sabihin mo na pagko-qualify and to quantify the participation and the medals, it doesn't suffice. Ang hirap pa rin sabihin sa isang ordinaryong tao, isang Pilipino, paano yung Pilipino na number 1 noong 2005, 2007? Sabihin mo, dayaan. Dinaya. I mean, 2013?
Yeah.
Makikita mo really is yung deteriorated state ng Philippine sports, and something that we will have to address kasi
now the budget that they received, and I'll ask this kay Commissioner later on. The budget they received in 2014 is 700 million from PAGCOR and then 680 million in 2013. You were saying that it is never enough, but given that budget, what do you think they can do? Do you think with this they can at least have a better performance for Southeast Asian Games or Asian Games or perhaps the Olympics?
meron silang program They launched a program, Commissioner, yung prioritization nila. Yung
Yes,
20
yeah, there's
to
a national
2016,
priority sports,
okay.
no? Priority sports.
Nakalagay doon. Tinignan ko lang yung sports. Of course, some of the sports, ko-questionin ko doon. But later on yan. No?
Yeah.
Like a wushu. Nakalagay doon sa priority ng sports. Ako, I practiced wushu nung younger days ko. Pero as a whole, I don't think yun yung sports na habulin natin. And nothing against yung mga kapatid natin who taught me yung basics of wushu before. No? Pero again, it's the prioritization.
And do you have a question on this prioritization? Given the budget that they had, they selected now the priority sports. I think Pinoy was the one who selected it. No, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that with this budget, it's not solving the problem.
Again, yung money will never be enough. But it is not just the solution to the problem.
Right. Okay.
Yun lang yung gusto ko sabihin. It will never be enough, pero hindi ho siya ang dahilan kung bakit masama ang performance natin. Masama ang performance natin dahil kailangan natin reviewin ang policy of all the National Sports Associations.
Commissioner Johnny, before we take a break, do you think that there's a flaw in the law? That's the reason why, as Chino pointed out, that's the reason why we're having problems with Philippine sports.
And let me first follow up on the issues that Chino was bringing up. Number one is about the money will never be enough, and I think that's a very, very, very clear point that we have to look at. Number one is that let's say you run a corporation, and your corporation knows exactly how much money you're going to earn from sales every year. You can easily forecast a 10-year growth plan. Dito, depende sa kung sino yung commissioner, kung sino yung nasa board, kung sino yung chairman, and the flavor of the month of the sports, you can see that the allocations to the sports go up and down. So when you take a look at sports that are successful in the Philippines today, like basketball, taekwondo, boxing, and then a few others, these are the sports that are funded not just by the PSC, but by private companies. Kasi if you just rely on the PSC, like during our time, finally, we've done clear budgeting for all the sports. Before, wala. If the chairman did not like you, you got nothing. No?
Right.
And so how can you now create a 10-year development plan for your athletes? You can't.
You can't because of
so what many of the sports were doing was they were just relying on the old heroes that they had. Kaya tignan mo yung mga ibang sports, no? For example, yung athletics. Yung ibang atleta nasa 30s already. Sila pa rin. Walang succession program, no? And that's when you don't have that ability to do long-term forecasting.
Okay,
so
Commissioner Johnny, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we need to take a short break.
Sure.
But we'll continue on with that discussion. We'll be back after a short break. Meanwhile, you can react or tweet your comments at posting_views. Use the hashtag OVSports. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views on the Solar News Channel. We have with us Chino Trinidad and Jolly Gomez. Our debate question for tonight is the government effectively addressing the problems of Philippine sports? Now, Commissioner Jolly, you're talking about the priority sports now, and then you had selected certain sports because of the limited budget. Given this limited budget, do you think that we are, or the government is providing the proper training for our athletes?
The answer is no. Let's take a look at how you train an athlete. There are so many factors that come in. Number one, you need good venues. Our youngest venue that we own in the country is Phil Sports. And Phil Sports was built even before you were born, Rod.
Wow,
no?
okay.
Yeah, so that's the youngest venue that we have. We've been trying to renovate them, but it's really bad. Where we want to develop a training center outside for athletes, but we don't have the budget for it. Secondly,
But given the resources, are you, I think, maximizing the resources?
well, we try, but it's very
Never enough.
difficult.
Kaya ako, if I may,
Yeah.
kasi you brought up something about infrastructure, where to train. Even if you have the best athletes, if you don't have the proper
Yes.
facility where to train, how can you train them? Paano mo susukatin yung takbo nila? Kailan sila mag-explode for a certain distance? If you don't have the proper measurement of the distance. Ang mga venues natin, not just that it's old, but it's substandard. Kulang siya ng siguro isang dipa, kalahating dipa. Yun ang problema.
Okay yung standards na, Chino.
Okay
Inayos
na.
na. Ayos na. No, but it's not just that. And this is following up from where Chino went. That is our national center. When you go to the provinces, halos wala na. And they have dilapidated track ovals and they don't have proper gym equipment. And so how can you get your grassroots to develop the athletes that will be your core to choose your elite athletes from? I went to the Southeast Asian Games in Naypyidaw, in Myanmar. When I went there, I was just crying when I looked at the facilities that were being built. Not just their national stadiums, but even their regional sports schools. No, Rod, we're being left behind. I mean, you go to Singapore, you go to Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. No, I mean, we're really being left behind. And that's number one lang, facilities. I haven't even started talking about allowances for athletes, the need for nutrition and medical support, which is very limited. And of course, international competition. Very briefly, I'll give you an example. In the national athlete, if you're a gold medal winner of the Southeast Asian Games, you get an allowance of 40,000 pesos, okay? Plus another training allowance of another 40,000. In order to develop an elite athlete, a country like Thailand will be spending at least a minimum of $3,000 a month to develop an elite athlete. These are the Southeast Asian Games winners, etc. We're way behind that, no? And that's just to develop one athlete. We are on our payroll, we have 780 athletes. So if you multiply that, talagang we cannot. That's why we had to prioritize sports and prioritize athletes. Kulang na kulang talaga. And you're only talking about the elite. How about your junior athletes, the ones in development?
Correct.
These kids are giving up their college courses, their careers, their families, in order to train to one day become an elite athlete. We don't have the funds to...
But year in, year out, that's what we hear. Whenever, every time we have a bad or a dismal performance in an Asian Games, or Southeast Asian Games, that's what we hear. Kulang ang budget, kulang ang budget. Is there anyone at least making a pitch? Maybe, Chino, you can answer this. Is there anyone making a pitch to the government? Look, if you spend only 3% of the DAP, for example, that's like 3 billion pesos or what have you.
Sinasabi ko alam mo
meron bang voice ang Philippine sports?
Wala. It's unfortunate that ang voice natin nandito sa
Media.
sa realm of media, nandito sa television, nasa radyo, nasa print, and even in social media. But it doesn't leave that realm Kasi hindi siya pinapakialaman Pag tinignan mo ngayon, mas highlighted lalo na ito, problema mo, paano gagawin mo? Sa bayan na hitik sa corruption, tama yung sinasabi mo, if we get just 3% of that misused and abused DAP, ang laki ng iaangat ng Philippine sports
If that's 143 billion, if 3% of that would be around
Ang ganda ng program
4 or 5
natin.
billion.
Pero yun hindi mangyari. Because that's beyond just even wishing upon a star, di ba? Ang pinakamalaking problema talaga natin, babalik ko yung main premise ko. Sports is not a priority. Pero hinihingian palagi natin, dinidemandan palagi natin yung mga athletes natin of performance na kailangan makamedal ka, kailangan may uwin yung championship, kailangan ganitong place ka. But yet, itong gobyerno natin, they don't even pay attention to sports. Yun ang tragedy that is known as Philippine sports.
But I'll say the devil's advocate. You mentioned earlier about facilities and all that, and the need for that. Manny Pacquiao didn't have much facilities. Usain Bolt, you said, is a very poor guy. A lot of African players, for example, runners, who are very good in marathons, they perform very well, and they're usually champions in mga Boston Marathon and New York Marathon, and they hardly have any nutrition and any facilities. So is it Kasi parang nagiging excuse na lang parate, no? And then I'll go later on about the financial support for athletes. But let's tackle this since we were talking about facilities. It's like we're making an excuse when in fact perhaps it's not even an excuse.
Okay. I think, Rod, you didn't let me finish my whole
Sige,
spiel.
go ahead. Go
Because
ahead, Commissioner Johnny.
remember that I talked about facilities, allowances, international exposure. The other one is training. See, if you don't have enough money to build your facilities, what more money to implement national training programs, no? When you look at training programs in other countries that are maybe not as prosperous as Europe or the United States, their facilities aren't top level. However, they have the funds to implement nationwide training programs, which the PSC just can't do. So, I watched the Palaro, which is supposed to be our premier sporting event, di ba, Chino, no? Yung ibang coaches, hindi nila alam something as simple as how to pass a baton, or something as simple as just very basic starting block positions, etc. on athletics. No? So you can see that the level of competence of our coaches is very, very low. Binanggit nga ni Chino about the driver coach. I don't even want to mention that because the guy is doing pretty well. No? And he's doing a good job, at least with his capabilities. No? But then, the infrastructure of a building is indicative of the programs that support that building. And so that's where I'm leading to. Jamaica, African countries don't have the great facilities, but they have a tradition for that certain sport. And this is why we may not have the best basketball courts in the country, pero ang gagaling ng mga basketball players because we have training programs for coaches. There's enough games, etc., that develop natural players like Bo Belga, who I admire so much for his limited physicality, to be able to play so well. No? And so that's what I want to point out.
Now, given that what we have, Chino, do you think that you were saying that budget will always be a problem, but what ails Philippine sports mainly apart from the law? You mentioned earlier it was law. A lot of people I know, my friends, are saying it's all about the bickering that's happening and the lawsuits happening among. Is that taking a toll?
No, definitely.
Sa ating mga development?
It's definitely yung bickering na yan, yung problems of budget that's never enough. Pero ako naman naniniwala kasi I'm sick and tired of actually finding the problems and exposing the ills. Kasi 25 years ako sa business na to and it has never changed. It's the same old sickness. No? Hindi ko lang kung anong gamot ang kailangan mo dito. Kailangan mo bang ipasok sa chemotherapy itong Philippine sports para mawala yung cancer sa kanya? Hindi mo maintindihan eh. But one thing's for sure. Punta ko doon sa isang side. The athletes. Kasi we're talking of the structure eh. Yeah. Di ba? We're not talking about the athletes. Meron silang naturalesa siya na lumaban. There is innate talent in them. There is never a lack of fight in our athletes. Yun kasi ang pinaka-resource natin eh. It's yung budget na yan, yung bickerings na yan, lahat yan minsan nakakalimutan natin. Sige, sabihin mo sa akin, explain to me how we produce the likes of Paing Nepomuceno, Efren Bata-Reyes, Bongku, Manny Pacquiao. Bakit natin i-produce? Hindi naman sila tinulungan ng gobyerno eh. Tinutulungan lang sila ng gobyerno as part of their incentives. Pero anong meron yung Pilipino? Yun yung hindi natin nakikita eh. That's the other side of it. Meron tayong natural talent. We don't have the lack of it. Babalikan ko ngayon yon. Meron tayong resources in terms of yung human resources, yung mga tao, yung mga talent natin. But really yun ang pinakamalaking problema. How do we end that? Pwede bang itsahan na lang ng atomic bomb kung uso pa ngayon, bagsakan ng nuclear para ma-purge.
Para
start a new clean slate. Yun lang at baka solusyon eh.
But do you think that our failure in the past international competitions, does it lead down ultimately to that? Or does it eventually lead to that? Yung the bickering, the lack, that of course the lack of funds is already always given, but the fact that we can't get our act together. You think that's it, or is it because talagang we're not marketing sports very well, both from the government and private sector?
Marketing sports, yon isa pang mabigat yon. Yung support for sports, nandun eh, di ba? Kaya naglilitawan lahat eh. Yung support from outside, it's waiting. Nandyan, nag-iintay. Ang problema nga, wala silang makitang semblance of direction or oneness doon sa mga leaders ng Philippine sports. That is what is keeping yung support from the outside
from coming in because of the
wala sila nakikitang hope eh. Pag nilagay nila yung nag-invest sila doon, anong mangyari sa investment?
There's a perception na now I want to delve into that. Jolly, after we take a short break, I need to cut at this point. We'll take a short break now. More on the issue of the state of Philippine sports when we come back. You're watching Opposing Views. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views on the Solar News Channel. I'm Rod Maceno. We have with us the Commissioner of the Philippine Sports Commission, Jose Luis Jolly Gomez, and Chino Trinidad, sports journalist and veteran observer of Philippine sports. Our question: is the government effectively addressing the problems of Philippine sports? All right. So now the PSC is aware of all the problems that what we have. No? So I guess the question is there a game plan? Given the limited budget, is there a game plan? And especially as we were mentioning earlier before we took a break, the main problem of getting the private sector to support is that the perception is that they generally don't trust maybe the PSC or just government officials involved in sports in general. So can you address that, Commissioner Jolly?
You know, let's talk about the game plan that we did. The first thing that we looked at was when we first came in, we took a survey of where we were at. We had aging athletes. We had very few competitions. There was no grassroots program. There was very, very limited regional participation. So what we did was first, we implemented two big projects, which is the Philippine National Games, which we got all the elite athletes together. Then we supplemented it with a program called Batang Pinoy, which is 15 years old and under, to help support the Palarong Pambansa, but with more sports covered. What we were able to do with that was we were able to try to bring in younger athletes that could help build the sports programs a little bit quicker. You know? Then with this, we were able to create an environment of constant competitions that schools could do, and regional development, because all of these different provinces that had sports programs entered and helped out in the Batang Pinoy. But really, it's all up to particular national sports associations, because the NSAs have to be attractive to private sponsors. You know,
so they should be doing their own marketing.
They have to, because you can't be totally from government. The Philippine model, maybe it's because we came from the Marcos years, was the godfather system. You know, you choose a godfather, and we've had so many through the years, from Danding Coangco to today MVP, to Ramon Ang, to the first gentleman Arroyo before. And that godfather system is not sustainable, because the godfather system is tied up to a political power or a corporate power. When you look at the models in so many other countries, it's always a corporation that ties into to the sport. You know, you have big companies supporting a particular sport, not just in countries
supporting
like,
it through thick and thin.
through supporting through a very, very well thought of corporate plan to develop an athlete. No? And that's not what we have here. You know, only 5% of the top 1,000 corporations are sponsoring in sports, and a lot of them are sponsoring in sports where they can get immediate returns back. That's why, I'll just tell you, this is a funny stat, no? You know, the PBA has a bigger budget than the PSC, because each company puts in 200 million. There are 10 companies. Their budget is bigger than ours, and so they have enough money to market, to develop programs, etc. No? And that's just for one sport. No? Take a look at the newspapers, Gino. You see it. The newspapers is just volleyball, basketball, golf, a little bit of football.
Well, taking off from that, just a quick question to Chino, and then I'll go back to you, Jolly, on the corruption side, no, and the perception. Do you think the government is doing enough to entice the private sector to come in?
Balikan ko yung sinabi ko kanina. If this government can't even prioritize sports, then what else would they do? So,
Well, when you say prioritize sports,
In
allot
terms
a
of
certain budget.
policies, in terms of
Policies,
in terms of absorbing yung impact of how we help sports, wala. You discuss sports, wala na siya. Talagang it's almost zero. Wala na. Pinag-uusapan lang siya pag may nananalo. Yun lang. But that's it. No? Yung binibigay natin, it's a token. That's the reality ng Philippine sports. Ngayon, gusto kong i-touch yung doon. Totoo yun. Yung PBA, ang laki ng budget nun. Sobra. Why are companies spending millions? Bakit, di ba? Pareho din naman ang nature ng PSC at saka ng PBA, di ba? To promote sports, di ba? Tapos, pareho din silang tax shelter, di ba? Admitin na natin, yung participation nitong mga corporations na ito, malaking bagay doon is expenses. Ichina-charge sila sa expenses nila. Pero bakit wala? Kasi nga, hindi nila nakikita yung direksyon. Babalik ako, it's a sense of direction. And what do they get in return? Tumulong ako sa PSC, tumulong ako sa isang athlete, what do I get in return? Do I get my media mileage? No. Wala. Hindi katulad sa PBA. It has regularity, and it's a form of entertainment, even if it's not the highest level of basketball that we see. Hindi ko tutulungan yun. Huwag na tayong lumayo. Even the UAP, it gets much na corporate help. Bakit? Kasi nakikita lang, may semblance of regularity, may media mileage ka, may balik, hindi ba?
May balik,
But in Philippine sports, wala.
Now, taking off from that, I think most people view is that Philippine sports is a representation of the government in general. There's full of corruption and bickering and all that. Your turn, Commissioner John.
Well, I think that
what are your thoughts on that?
what people fail to see is whenever they mention the word corruption, they will see one small part of the big whole. No? In terms of what we're trying to do, when you look at the sports that we have to support, there are 52 different NSAs that we have to, support, and everyone is focused on the big ones, like the basketballs or the ASCALs, etc. But there's so many other smaller sports, like taekwondo or karate or judo, and so many other wrestling, or all these other sports that need government support, and it's the same problem that will exist in all countries. All countries are short on funds on the sports that sometimes will actually help you in the Southeast Asian Games, Asian Games, etc. But the focus will always be on the sports that are popular because the advertisers can get something in return.
But Commissioner, sorry to digress, but talking about the corruption part, no? In 2011 there was a complaint filed against Chairman Harry Ang Ping for a questionable contract. Then in PSC Chair Richie Garcia reported 32 million pesos in unliquidated funds, from about 30 NSAs. Those things have impact on the perception of the private sector. So how are those addressed? How are you addressing those?
I think the way that we've addressed this is through transparency. If you can look at the first thing that we did on our part when we came in as a board of commissioners was we published every single check that was disbursed and every single board resolution that was. We posted it on a Facebook page that we created specifically for that. So transparency is the #1 way that you fight corruption. You put everything out there. And a lot of the bad habits that were happening before were actually changed. But of course, you cannot change human nature overnight. There are some people that are very dependent on this for their livelihood, that it becomes quite a struggle for us. But I think when you look at the majority of what we've been able to accomplish, we've been pretty good in fighting that whole the problem of corruption. As a matter of fact, this is why we have such a problem with the internal politics that exists right now in sports, because the gravy train is not quite there anymore because of very, very frugal spending, or I shouldn't say frugal, prudent spending on the part of the PSC today.
All right. Now, Chino, what is the main reason why we have this political bickering? I mean, if there's not a lot of money in sports, people are asking, why are they fighting? What's all of these lawsuits about? And
Alam niyo yan.
Diba? I mean, and thus affecting the performances of the athletes.
Alam mo, maybe the money is not there. But ang power, I believe, that power drowns you. The attention drowns you. May mga tao na nakaupo dyan, that they're in it, not maybe for the money. Kasi sabi mo, may checks and balances na. Pero yung pupunta ka sa isang Olympic tournament, and you get seats, and you get first class treatment, Ganun siya. You go to FIFA.
Para kang ambassador, para kang
Mahigit pa.
More pa.
Oo, hindi, ang sarap ng buhay mo. Hindi ka, alam mo, darating ka sa airport, nakasundo ka ng limo, dadaling ka sa suite mo sa isang napakagandang hotel. And ito, may mga tendency to drown you. Even if you're not the best of managers out there. Diba? Nandyan ka, nagstay ka because you want the perks of it. The perks of being a sports leader. Unfortunately, yung sports leader natin dito doesn't equate to performance and to protecting the interest of sports. Hindi naman nila na-manage eh. Mahirap magsalita, pero ilabas na natin yung pangalan. Yung POC, kasi hindi natin napapag-usapan eh. PSC ng PSC, yung nabubugbog natin dito eh. Yung POC, although it's autonomous in nature, it has the direct responsibility of making sure that we have healthy national sports associations. Healthy national sports associations equate to athletes who will train, who will be nurtured, who will be our champions.
So again, to clarify nga, the POC is not a government entity.
Hindi.
No. Kasi most people, kaya nalilito mga...
Kayo, dalawang abogado. Ito nakakatuwa. It's, for me, it's a situation ng Pilipinas. It's sa inyong midterm, unattainable ba yan? Hindi pwede mangyari kasi, imagine mo, ang nagdidictate ng affairs ng Philippine sports, walang makakahabol sa kanya na government entity. So, ibig sabihin, I can do whatever I want to. So, yung mga nakaupo doon, anong unang papasok? I can abuse my power and get away with murder. So, yun ang nangyayari. Hindi ko sinasabi pumapatay sila. Pero pumapatay sila literally of the dreams of this nation to run a great program.
Commissioner Jolly, I know you have a point. Unfortunately, we have to take a short break, but we'll reserve that for when we come back. So don't go away. When we come back, the result of our online poll on the issue and the final words from our guests. Please stay tuned. You're watching Opposing Views. Welcome back. This is Opposing Views. I'm Ron Pomoceno. Our guests, Chino Trinidad and Jose Luis Jolly Gomez. Our debate question for tonight, is the government effectively addressing the problems of Philippine sports? Right before we took a break, Chino was making a point about the problems involving the POC, no? Because the POC, obviously, it's the one organization, it's a non-government organization that you have to work with, the PSC has to work with, but it's sort of like the big organization that's spearheading all of the national sports associations. Commissioner Jana, you wanted to make a point on the point of...
yes. Well, the thing is that the POCs, it's under the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, which really has a very clear standard on non-government intervention into the affairs of the IOC. Very similar to what FIFA is going through right now in the World Cup, non-government intervention. And I acknowledge what Chino said about the problems, but I just also want to point out that these problems exist in most other countries wherein where the government is very involved in funding, and you have an Olympic committee that is running the show, what we say, in terms of the international games. No? And why is it that it seems to be a problem in the Philippines, but not too much a problem in other countries like Vietnam or China or Thailand, etc.? I think the problem really goes back to who we are as a government body. We're a commission. When you look at our laws are really just to recommend programs, to try to get people together, to formulate policies, etc. We are not really an implementing agency. In order to be an implementing agency, you have to go up to a department level, like the Department of Education. That's an implementing agency for schools. So there have been some very good and worthy moves by congressmen and senators to develop a Department of Sports.
And are you spearheading that?
Well, we cannot spearhead, but we've given our positions. And I think it will be something that's great, because the moment you create a Department of Sports, you now have regional offices. You now have what I call that whole integrated training program. You can now be in better control of training facilities. Even in terms of procurement, etc., it becomes more standardized. So you can now create an environment that will help, I don't want to say regulate, but will assist the private Olympic committees in identifying their talent.
Is that highly possible, though, or is that a dream? I mean, is that going to happen in our lifetime or,
I think
or in the next 5 years?
Sa next election.
Ito yung chismis na narinig ko from my friendly senators and congressmen is that the question really is a matter of the budget. How much budget will be allocated to the Department of Sports? Right now, the Philippine Sports Commission only receives 180 million from the national government. If you create a Department of Sports, the minimum budget you'll have is about 1.8 to 2 billion. So saan manggagaling yung balanse na yan ng mga 1.8 billion pesos?
Pwede ba kunin yun doon?
Ay, hindi ko pwede mag-comment naman. Ikaw naman, Chino.
But Chino, your thoughts on that? Do you think the department would solve it, you think? Or mas
part of the solution. It's not an end-all.
Kasi baka madagdag na naman yung bureaucracy, lalo pang magiging...
Para sa akin, magkakaroon siya ng teeth, magkakaroon siya ng accountability, mga bagay that we don't have right now. No? Yun ang problema kasi, di ba dati, it used to be Department of Education, Culture, and Sports. Tinanggal, naging DepEd na lang. So doon yung makikita, dalawang bagay, sports and culture, dalawang mighty and major components of nation building. List of the priorities. Tama, sports pala nag-uusapan natin. We haven't even dwelt on culture, di ba? Yung sining. Sining, nakasama yung musika doon at saka yung likha. Yung sports at saka yung culture, kinalimutan na natin. Nagpunta tayo sa education. Ano nangyari? So we have to create that. Same thing siguro with arts and culture. We have to put muscle. We have to, kung pwede mong turukan siya ng steroids, okay. Yung budget, actually, problemahin na later on yun kung 1.8 billion.
Basta may teeth lang.
Kailangan tayong magka-power.
Kasi tayo
we need a voice. We need a voice.
Kasi our congressmen and senators are the first to complain every time we perform badly in international competition.
Pero napapansin mo, it's more so sa attention. Kasi alam nila, pagka gumawa sila ng, anong tawag doon, yung papatawag sila.
Papatawag sila ng investigation.
Masukin sila nila, Biakitano, nila Senator
You're gonna have a Senate hearing. Why did we perform badly?
Okay. Pero ginagamit lang siya just para i-fan yung fire. Pero ano yung solution nila? Diba? Yun ang hinahanap natin eh. Give sports a personality. Kasi ngayon, it's living a nomadic experience. Hindi nyo pa napapansin, neither here nor there ang Philippine sports. So maybe a department or a ministry, whatever we have it, basta bigyan siya ng isang posisyon sa gobyerno where it can coexist with the other departments.
Now, going back to the limited budget that we have and working with PSC and POC. Now, the PSC and POC have their priority sports program, right? Now, Pinoy has committed 200 million pesos to what is coined as the Focus Sports Policy. And the PSC selected 10 sports to focus on and fund, primarily for the Olympics, yung chance natin for Olympics. Archery, athletics, billiards, bowling, boxing, taekwondo, swimming, weightlifting, wrestling, and wushu. You had your thoughts on wushu earlier. What are your thoughts, Chino, on this priorities focus sports policy?
Ako yung billiards, hindi ko lalagay kasi una-una hindi siya Olympic sport. Doon palang flawed na yun. Yun palang flawed na yun. Kasi billiards will never be an Olympic sport. So why do we put that sa Olympic list?
Pati bowling, di ba?
Bowling din.
Bowling din, no?
Yeah, so
Olympic, ito ang si Commissioner tatanungin ko. Hindi ko alam sino ano listahan na to kasi baka kasama sa doon.
Commissioner,
pero siguro priority sports siya, not necessarily for Olympics because obviously these are not Olympic sports.
I think the criterion that we chose the priority sports with was really through the guidance of the President was sports that will give national pride. Not Olympics. National pride was the So, national pride.
May shot tayo. May shot.
Yeah, so that's why we included billiards and bowling because we were world champions there. Even wushu, we're actually world champions in wushu. No? We're doing very well in that sport. That's why we selected that list. The other one about the priority sports is that the list is very fluid. It can change. If the sports do not perform well, and we actually can replace them with another sport that's coming up. No? Like, chess is a fantastic sport. That's now a priority sport. And we're doing very well in chess. No? Dragon boat is another one that people are talking about. So, that list of what we call a priority sport is rather fluid. No? Of course, we still have our boxing and taekwondo because we have world champions there. Athletics and swimming is there because they're mandatory sports and they're mass-based sports that we want to look at. But, in order to come out with a list of 10, it was so funny. I don't know if I asked you this, but when we were coming out with the list, I think I asked you, I asked Kinito, I asked a lot of our friends in media to come out with the list. Nobody came out with the same names. And that's how difficult it is to develop a criterion. We actually did both. We did an objective criterion And at the end, we had a list, and we polled a lot of people in the community to come out with that final list.
How do we avoid the same situation as the Philippine Dragon Boat team, for example, where they were barred from international competition because of infighting? At least that's from that's the perception of people. Na parang there was infighting among officials, and thus the Philippine Dragon Boat team, which is a champion team, was prevented.
I think we need another hour to discuss that. You know, that's another opposing view that you can mahabang kwento.
Kasi each NSA, I agree, each NSA, infighting nila, talagang yan ang what is dragging down yung kanilang particular sport. Madami yan.
I mean,
swimming, nandyan ang Dragon Boat.
Even when you were head of basketball, ganun din ang nangyari. Kaya nagkaroon ng SBP.
Pero alam mo, ang gandahan ng basketball, kung basketball pag-uusapan natin, tama-tama, papasok na tayo dito sa World Championships.
Yes.
No? Kahit na hindi tayo nagpe-place, kahit na hindi tayo, sabihin natin, #1 in Asia anymore, yung pagmamahal ng bayan na to sa basketball is so much na nada-drown out natin yung mga problema. And people just coming together, huge companies, small companies, everyone just coming together. Yun ang beauty ng sports eh. Yun ang value of sports, coming together. Professional boxing, hindi naman tinutulungan kasi professional siya, hindi sila under ng ambit ng PSC, and yet it performs, it creates, it produces world champions. Anong meron? Pag di ba kada may mananalo na Pilipino, ang sarap-sarap ng buhay. Kapag nananalo ng linggo si Manny Pacquiao, ang mga Pilipino, akala mo hindi lumalanding ang paa pag naglalakad.
Yes.
Ganun yun eh. Euphoric tayo. Yun ang malungkot sa sports. We don't prioritize it. And yet, ang galing niya eh. Pantanggal siya ng sama ng loob. Even for a moment, di ba? Yun yung sinasabi ko, we need to help sports. Bigyan natin ng boses.
Magdadagdag lang ako ng konti kasi this is a project that I advocate, and Chino has helped me out with this. This was with regards to Little League, you know, our Little League softball program. Alam mo, Little League softball program, Chino was a very big part of this. 5 years ago, he helped out. In Smoky Mountain, we built a baseball field, and we got kids to play. And these kids, this year, have won a tournament and are going to be playing in the World Series in the US.
Wow.
Alam mo, Rod, when you see the whole community, we've gone there with a TV crew, with a news crew, and we've shot the kids. They live in the squatters, but they walk with that sense of pride. The whole school treats them like rock stars because they're traveling to the US na talagang batang squatter to. Wow. This is what sports does. See, it doesn't really need to be a world championship. But what Chito says about, you know, Chino says about the uniting factor of sports, ang ganda talaga nun.
All right, now, we're reaching the tail end of the show, unfortunately. You're right, we should have at least 3 hours for this. But, Commissioner Jolly, do you believe that the country will still get back to the old glory days? No? I mean, when you say glory days, we're probably talking about Isidro Del Prado, Lydia de Vega, those days where when there's an international competition, we have at least a shot. I'm not saying we always win, because as you mentioned earlier, World Cup, there's only one champion. But where we have a shot. Do you think we'll ever go back to that to those days? Okay,
let me just, and I'm going to address that. Let me just address something. So there are 168 countries that compete in the Olympics. Out of the 168 countries that compete, only 20% of the countries actually win medals. So many countries do not win medals in the Olympics. But there's something bigger that we want to look at. When you talk about the glory days of sports, it's really about getting people involved in sports, and that's what is more important to me. To me, it's about getting dads and kids and moms and daughters going out there and participating in sports. No? The glory days will follow when you have a lot of people getting involved in sports. No? Now, the other thing, the number 2 point I want to make is that when I look at the community of sports today, there are a lot of young people like Chino, like you, and a lot of young local government officials, young people even in sports associations that are now moving up in the ranks. These are now the clear decision makers. And they come out with a very different perspective. It's not old-style politics anymore. The game is changing with technology, with the access to training from YouTube and internet and everything else. I think this is what will help us get to that next level. So I'm very, very optimistic about the direction of where sports will go in the future.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner. Chino, do you believe that the Philippines is primed to go back to its old glory days?
Actually, we never left. No? Allow ko i-address din yung mga nanonood sa atin. we never left that eh. Yung, sabi ko nga nung minsan, yung DNA of greatness ng mga Pilipino, nasa loob pa rin ho natin. Hindi naman ho nawawala yan eh. Lumalaban tayo, nandun yung puso natin. Alam natin na pagka pumunta tayo dyan, nandyan ang sense of pride. Balikan lang natin yung pagmamahal natin sa bayan. That is, ito yung para pinaka-building component eh. Once we have that, lalaban tayo ng patayan para sa bayan natin. And that is what I've learned from the athletes whom I have actually encountered the last 25 years. Hindi nawawala sa puso ng Pilipino yung paglaban para sa bayan. At saka hindi mawawala yung galing ng mga Pilipino kasi ano yan eh, it's in our DNA. Yeah. Di ba? Sports allows us to believe in ourselves. Yun yung gustong message na iparating sa inyo ng mga sinauna nating mga bayani the last 100 years ng Philippine sports. Maniwala lang yung mga Pilipino na bayan tayo ng hindi mga nangungurakot, na walang ginawa, mga kapalamuka, na mga manhid. Yeah. We are a nation of great champions. Something that you and I should never forget.
Yan. And yan ang mantra ng opposing views. You have to have that competitive fire. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to our guests, Chino Trinidad and Jose Luis Jolly Gomez of the PSC. Now let's feel the pulse of our viewers through our online poll. Our question is the government effectively addressing the problems of Philippine sports? Those who answered yes, 40%, and those who answered no, 60%. And that's our opposing views for tonight. Tune in again next week for another bold and engaging discussion on today's most relevant issues. I'm Rod Depomuceno. Good night and God bless.